Welcome to the Billionaire Mindset, your 30-day journey to thinking like a billionaire. Now you can just watch this video, or if you want to sign up for the entire series for free and get the bonus PDF companion calendar, check the link in the description below. Today is bonus day 4, and we're going to learn from the 4th richest person on the planet at the time of this recording with a net worth of $126.8 billion, Mr. Bill Gates.
I think you can worship and mythologize the idea of working extremely hard. For my particular makeup, I mean, it really is true that I didn't believe in weekends, I didn't believe in vacations. I mean, I knew everybody's license plate, so I could tell you over the last month when their car had come and gone from the parking lot. So I don't recommend it. I don't think most people would enjoy it. Once I got into my 30s, I could hardly even imagine how I had done that. Because by then, some natural behavior kicked in, and I loved weekends, and my girlfriend liked vacations, and that turned out to be kind of a neat thing. Now I take lots of vacations. I mean, my 20-year-old self is so disgusted with my current self. I was sure I would never do anything but ride and coach. Now I have a plane. So it's very much counter-revelations have taken place at high speed. But yes, it is nice if during those first several years, if you have a team that's chosen to be pretty maniacal about the company. And how far that goes, you should have a mutual understanding, so you're not one person expecting one thing, another person expecting another thing. And you'll have individuals who have, health or relatives or things that are distracted. But yes, I have a fairly hardcore view that there should be a very large sacrifice made during those early years.
Today, people come to you all the time for money, I assume. Everywhere you go, people say, by the way, I have this thing you should invest in. I have a couple myself, I'll mention later. No, I'm just kidding. No, a couple of things you should invest in or things you should give money to. So how do you resist it? You have some person who says no for you, or how do you do that?
Many people.
Many people say no.
Well, once you've picked what you care about, if somebody has something that can make a difference in global health, we're super interested. And we have a staff of 1,500 people, and if it's to do with global health, some of those people will come out and talk through with you whatever your innovation is and how we can partner with you on that. Okay. So that's clearly in our area. If it is something that can substantially improve K through 12 education, then we're going to be very interested in it. If people are asking outside of those things, then fortunately you can say no, because focus is key to philanthropy. The digital revolution, internet, social media, all of that, in certain respects, it's made it easier for us to see what's going on. Medical researchers are publishing articles every day, and all over the world, people can immediately see what the new thinking is there. Tracking the disease statistics, I click on the Johns Hopkins website every morning and see, okay, which countries are having a tough time with cases or deaths. Thank God for the internet. Work at home, our ability to connect up with each other is driven by that. But it also has meant that a lot of very surprisingly interesting conspiracy theories that are false, sadly, they spread a lot faster than the truth. So the idea that did somebody intentionally cause this thing, completely false, even in some cases accusing me of having some connection, that can be dangerous because it means, your willingness to believe, is the vaccine something I should take? Should I wear masks? If you go for these simple but wrong theories, getting people to work together and protect each other so we can get out of this as soon as possible, that's really at risk. You raised the question of how should the government deal with that. It's very difficult. Ideally, citizens are just well informed and they know which publications are very careful about what they say, and we don't have to engage in censorship. But so much of the almost crazy false information is out there that looking at the companies like Facebook and saying, okay, what is their role in that? When somebody says masks don't work, which is wrong, or they say just take hydroxychloroquine and you'll be totally safe. What is their responsibility for catching those things, particularly when they get up to large numbers? That is being debated. And, I think we'll come out of this with those companies feeling a stronger sense of responsibility and actually understanding, having the public debate about how they need to help here. You really have to believe the internet's going to be mainstream. A lot of people are going to get out there and use it, and that they're going to be willing to pay for some content.
Is that the operating idea that you have?
Well, each of these businesses is an entrepreneurial business. The overreaching theme is that, yes, I believe in the internet. I believe it'll get increasingly popular, and we're doing some neat new things to take advantage of that.
You've got a lot of cash on hand, yes?
Right.
All right. It puts you in an enviable position. You can experiment with a lot of entrepreneurial ideas and see what sticks and what flies.
Well, we're in business to make money,
but the other thing is providing such a cash flow for you.
Well, it all belongs to the shareholders.
Yeah.
We're not dilettantes.
No, I know.
We are business people, and it is true that if you find an idea that requires 3 or 4 years of improvement and patience and really sticking with it, that we're very good at that. Take Windows, which we bet our company on. Everybody doubted that would succeed. IBM did not support us in that. It took longer than we expected, over 4 years before finally graphical interface got popular, and now people take it for granted. It's part of every personal computer, and you just expect it to be there. That was one of the grand successes of the company. In the same way, we're betting on the internet, that our tools there will be popular, and that a few of these content plays that we've decided to get involved in, that the scale and the users will make those into great businesses. We also are big believers in United Way and what goes on there, and that's more at a business level. We sort of think every business ought to do that as a basic thing, because social services, we think, deserve particular priority in terms of drawing employees in to help the community. And there's ways to take those fundraising things within a company and have contests and comparisons and great stories, get the word out, make it fun, make it easy. It's just a piece of email. The easiest thing to do is click and say you want to give your fair share, and then we send you no more email. So we've made it the easiest thing to do is participate. In terms of individuals, it's quite different. You can take and give to groups like United Way, who are really thinking about everything in the community, or you can find things, and most people mix this, you can find things that you're particularly interested in, that you know about, that a relative benefited from, or that you want to go and volunteer in. Microsoft does a thing now. For every hour that somebody volunteers, we actually make a grant to that organization, because that says that they care about it and they think it's doing very good work. Now, for individuals at some levels, probably most of your giving is going to be in the community where you know what's going on. I'm a big believer that some of the greatest inequities are on a global basis. And so one of the things our foundation tries to get out is the names of a number of organizations like Save the Children or Global Fund or Vaccine Fund that we know are taking dollars in a very efficient way and saving lives and improving conditions. And I would hope that as people are able to be fairly generous, that this international component, that it be part of what they're doing. Obviously, if you get up to enough scale, then you can take on big projects. And I will get a chance with some of my extra time to go out and share with people who are lucky enough to have wealth, just tell them how much fun I'm having and that it can have impact, and hopefully encourage it. I think when Warren Buffett gave his gift, it sent a message to people that, wow, this is the right thing to do, and he doesn't like to waste money. So a sense that there are causes out there that you can make a big difference with. There's no doubt that creating a board, having people like Dave Marquardt there who wasn't at the company, and we were so overwrought about, this is right, this is wrong, we messed this up, that having people have a little bit of distance come in and talk to us is good. For the last 30 years or so, I've gotten to be friends with Warren Buffett, and he's in Omaha. He's not in this tech world at all, you know, and to him it's like, hey, how could you ever know which will rise and which will fall? I'm not going to put money until Apple sold at a multiple of 12. Then he decided he could put 50 billion into that. After he asked all his friends, hey, you know, if somebody had an iPhone that was half as expensive, would you switch away? You know, or is it more like jewelry where you really want to have an iPhone? And so he decided that those profit streams might not be eliminated anytime soon. Anyway, because he's not in this world, he has a definite way of looking at things, including this idea of how work should be fun. He has made his work so much fun that he works more hours than I do. He works 6 days a week at 88 years old. And he likes to say that he skips to work every day. He doesn't, but he says that.
It's a good visual.
When he was 83, he could still skip, but now he's gotten really, he can't do it. Having somebody like that, you know, the toughest thing I went through was this antitrust lawsuit where, you know, it didn't seem very predictable, and he was a great counsel during all of that stuff. So getting somebody who's successful in another domain, but yet kind of a business type mindset. Anyway, for me, that was a huge gift. I think it's important that we build that feedback system. Now, exactly how you do that, how much you connect that up to the pay system, you know, we need experimentation, and we can look at these other countries that have done it. There is a move afoot to do some of this, but whether the investment levels be enough to make it high quality, and whether there'll be kind of high stakes that overuse the test scores for this stuff and will sort of hurt its reputation, it's hard to say at this point, but I'd say it's giving more feedback to teachers would be the very first thing that would get us back up to being one of the best in the world. If you want to have impact, usually delegation's important. Although, you know, individual contributors in terms of inventing a drug or a new approach to things, that's phenomenal. So when Microsoft first got started, I wrote most of the code, and everybody else's code I read and kind of rewrote. And that got us up to 10 people, and then I had to say to myself, okay, we're going to ship code that I didn't edit. And that was hard for me. But you know, I kind of got over that. Then I still said, okay, I'm going to interview everyone, and I'm going to at least look at samples of their code. Well, that got us up to about 40 people. And that was at a point where I had sold way more software than we could write because everybody was so impressed. And I thought, well, I need to collect enough money to, you know, keep hiring all these people. But the demand was so high that, you know, we were actually falling behind. That's when I hired Steve, and Steve figured out how to control what promises I made to people, and B, how to hire lots of people and really good people and create organizations and teams. So I delegated to Steve that, and he was constantly saying to me, okay, we're going to hire programmers that you've never met, and I'd say, no, we're not. And then he would show me numerically that the constraint wasn't going to work, you know, so then I said, okay, then I would, you know all the managers of the people. And so over time, and of course, you know, I could say the quality per person was falling monotonically, according to me. But, you know, large problems, if you want to, you know, write the most popular office productivity software, that one person absolutely can't do that. You can write pretty code. So everyone has to decide what scale of organization they want to work in. Eventually, you know, my role was very much as a leader and a reviewer of managers, but the top people, and I hired some super experienced people, I would make sure they were pursuing a common vision and they were well coordinated. But in terms of a lot of management stuff, they were way better than I was. Now I had to have the framework to know what mix of skills that we needed and, you know, when they were working well enough together. But a lot of, you know, my value added was picking, say, to do graphics user interface or to do an integrated office type thing, or to go global and not use agents to have Microsoft be present all over the world. And so yeah, picking what you're good at and how you find the other people to fill in those things, that's super important. And most founders aren't able to scale that up and kind of give up the hands-on things that they used to get a lot of pleasure and comfort from. Urgency that I felt that if we didn't get Microsoft going right away, that somebody would do a great job building a software company, we won't have a chance. That probably ended up not being true, that I could have waited 2 or 3 years and the opportunity to do Microsoft still would be there. But anyway, I felt a sense of urgency. And it's not like, I still get to take courses and learn things today, things like The Learning Company, and there's all sorts of great books. So it's not like I've missed some part of my education.
Right. When you dropped out, your father and mother said, "Are you sure you know what you want to do?" If one of your children dropped out of college to start a company, what would you say?
Well, I'd have to say yes, but the dropping out is not an irrevocable decision. If you try and start a company that doesn't go well, they always let you go back. Okay. And so if you don't have, kids that you need to support, it's a very low risk thing, particularly in the culture of the United States, where trying to start something and failing is not a black mark for the rest of your life.
So when you were starting Microsoft, there were a lot of other software companies, and you were not number one at the beginning. I think there were others who were a little bit further ahead. What was it that enabled you to beat everybody else up in the software business? Was it Bill Gates? Was it something else? What was the unique factor that made you the most successful?
Yeah, we were actually the first. But there were companies, and they were all kind of single product companies, who got ahead of us in terms of sales. By about 1991, we did become the largest of all of them. We were an engineering company. We were about how you hire smart people and how you use tools to develop software broadly. We were global, and we weren't about a single product. So like, for example, WordPerfect was a word processor, somebody might remember. They did so well with that product that their gross sales rivaled ours when we were doing a broad set of products. As soon as graphics interface caught on, which was Windows that became mainstream in 1995, we became far larger than the other software companies. Now, subsequently, Google, Apple, Amazon have become, also extremely successful. But in the 90s, we were the strongest by far. There's no doubt that the antitrust lawsuit was bad for Microsoft, and we would have been more focused on creating the phone operating system. And so instead of using Android today, you would be using Windows Mobile. If it hadn't been for the antitrust case, Microsoft would have gone, we were so close. I was just too distracted. I screwed that up because of the distraction. And we were just 3 months too late with the release that Motorola would have used on a phone. So yes, it's a winner-take-all game, that is for sure. That now nobody here has ever heard of Windows Mobile. But oh well. And I wouldn't, that's a few $100 billion here or there. I wouldn't have retired as soon. And that one is less, I am disappointed that Windows Mobile didn't succeed. But in terms of my own life, even though it was a very painful thing because I got very personally involved in the defense of the company, the fact that I retired earlier probably net was good for me because I got down the learning curve on the foundation. I got to partner with Melinda in the early days of the foundation. And I don't have a life where I'm allowed to complain because basically, only 99% of things have worked out very, very well. The idea that you could get people to decide to support this foreign aid thing, which is a big deal for our foundation, from a numeric point of view, we're still pushing that a little bit, but honestly, the story of the one child if you say to an audience, here's the picture of this child, shall we save this child? They're more engaged than if you said, hey, let's save 1 million children. So there's definitely a sort of 10 to the 6th problem here somewhere.
Yeah, that's
that
fascinating.
Humans are not wired to do that on a numeric basis. And so, that's why we have people like Bono and many others who come from a more storytelling world, and then they let me throw a few charts and numbers in just because I think that should be there. Once your heart tells you what direction to go in, to prove that this is a very affordable, not a big deal, well-managed path to be on.
If you were 20 years old today and you wanted to start a new company, drop out of Harvard, what company or what area would you want to start it in?
Well, this is a great time to be doing innovation because the tools of innovation are so much better. There are lots of things in biology that are very interesting. There are lots of things in energy that are interesting. Given my background, I would start an AI company whose goal would be to teach computers how to read so that they can absorb and understand all the written knowledge of the world. That's an area where AI has yet to make progress, and it will be quite profound when we achieve that goal.
Most people over the last 200 years or so, whoever the wealthiest person in the world was, didn't usually work that hard when they got to be 60 or so. They kind of took life easy. You seem to be working pretty hard. What motivates you to still work so hard?
Well, I love my work. The work of the foundation is super interesting. I get to meet with the scientists. I get to go out in the field. I do think your habits are sort of set in your 20s and 30s. And by my standards of the 20s, I didn't believe in weekends back then, not to mention vacations. So I'm, fairly lazy compared to myself in my 20s, where I was a true fanatic. All I believed in was working on software night and day. And for my 20s, that was perfect. I didn't have a wife or family at all. And my role was very hands-on role. I'm very lucky that my foundation work, the part-time work I do for Microsoft, I see that extending, for decades into the future. And having an understanding of innovation, I think shaping innovation in many of these areas, there is a unique role that I can help play. I like to look at numbers a lot. And so when I look at the numbers, I'm just amazed, whether it's the quality of the inner city education, the dropout rates. Oprah did a thing where she had kids from an inner city school go look at the suburban school and vice versa. And they were just stunned that the building and everything was so completely different. So I think, even for me, I have to go, whether it's the inner city in America, talking to people who live there, or outside the US, we have this same thing. The situation in Africa, it's overwhelmingly black population, is so much worse than people are probably aware of. And so hands-on visits, whether it's to the schools or the clinics, I think that is necessary to hear the voices of people who've been hurt. And then, there's a lot of good movies now. There's a lot of good books. I was just reading the new Jim Crow, which is pretty eloquent and forceful about the justice system and the role that it plays in perpetuating bad conditions. And, it takes a lot to try and put yourself having empathy for other people. So we all have to push harder on this. I get to, when I, say, okay, we're going to build a TB drug team. We're going to build the TB vaccine team. We're going to build kill all the mosquitoes in the world, gene drive CRISPR team. I get to, in terms of how we fund that, organize it, how many locations, do we wait till they have this result before we scale it up? I get to use the same, or 80% the same type of thinking that I exercised in terms of, okay, let's go do Windows, let's go do Excel. So it's backing engineers, it's getting a sense of the team, what needs to be added to that team, or the IQs on the team adding up as opposed to subtracting from each other. And it's very comfortable because the most intense period of Microsoft was where these teams were about size 30. And for our diseases, typhoid, rotavirus, there's a lot of diseases that hopefully you'll never hear of again, most of which don't exist here in the US. But so it is very, very similar. It takes a decade generally from start to finish. The AIDS vaccine, actually, we're on year 14, and it'll probably be another 8 to 10 years before that one is completely done. So some take as long as 20 years because there's many dead ends and you have kind of a portfolio of approaches. But yes, I feel like my working with governments, hiring smart people, managing teams, it did prepare me well for this very operational organization that's a lot like a business, except that our profit is lives saved as opposed to a monetary measure. Certainly during the time I was at Harvard, I wasn't sure what I was going to do. The idea that software was this field that the opportunity was unbelievable. That became more obvious during the 3-year period I was here. But my dad had been a lawyer. I thought of mathematics, like doing well in the Putnam. That was the coolest thing. And the computer software, I didn't think those people were as smart as the math people. So it's like, well, am I going to go into the easy field or this really hard field? But anyway, math was fantastic. When I finally picked and decided to go do Microsoft, then I got into a period from age 19 to about 40 where I wasn't able to look at the latest on how tornadoes work or how mitochondria work. I was pretty monomaniacal. And when I was able to ask Steve, this is the year 2000, Steve Ballmer, he mistakenly graduated, but then he started at but I was trying to hire him, but his parents told him you're supposed to graduate, which was fine. But then he started at Stanford Business School, and he was in his first year, and I thought, well, this is perfect. I'll get him to drop out of Stanford Business School. So in a certain sense, he is a dropout. And he was very key to the success of Microsoft. I mean, he knew a lot of things. But during that period, I didn't get to do much. At Harvard, I took all these courses because it was just so amazing that people were interested in talking about them. And I have to say, I never went to a lecture during reading period or anything because the courses that I was actually signed up for, I finally started to work on those. So I was in Hillel the minute it would open to the minute it would close during reading period, trying to catch up on that other set of courses. So people say I'm a dropout, which is literally true, but because I like college courses, the online college courses, there's a company called The Learning Company that I buy tons and tons of their stuff, and I do at least 4 or 5 courses a year. In a sense, I like going to college more than anyone. So I've sort of made sure my job, certainly post-Microsoft, that I get to spend my time meeting with scientists, learning new things, seeing what the hard problems are, in some cases giving money to people to take on those very, very hard problems. I decided to focus more on giving away than making money. And so I've gotten a chance to travel the world, be out in Africa and Asia quite a bit, and see the needs that are out there. And now our foundation is very focused on global health, focused on agriculture, because the majority of the very poor in the world are farmers who have very small plots of land. So any increase in productivity or certainty of their crop coming in can make a huge difference for them. And you might think of a career in software, selling to people who can afford personal computers, and now the career at the foundation is being very different. And certainly they're different in the sense that now it's about vaccines. Now a lot it's with various governments, the donor governments, the governments in import countries. But at its core, it's really basically the same thing, which is finding innovators, people who've got breakthrough ideas, be willing to back them, understand what they're working on, measure what they're coming up with, Try and make sure that when it's delivered, it really has the impact it's supposed to be, and getting into a feedback loop driven by very precise measurement. First I met Warren, we were talking about getting together and doing something again, and he pulled out his calendar, and the pages were so blank. And I said, wow, you've managed to avoid getting tied into a lot of kind of meaningless activity. And Warren said, yeah, you have to be good at saying no and picking the things that really make a difference. And that's one of many things I've learned from Warren, but that's one of my favorites. And so I can blame it on him whenever I'm turning things down. The nice thing now that I'm not so extreme, in my 20s, I didn't get to read much at all. Yeah. And so like all this stuff was going on in biology and math. I just didn't get to read it. Then when I did get into my 30s, those vacations were a time to go back because when I was a student, you could study all sorts of things. Anyway, now, I read a lot of science, and that uses up, maybe half of the slots that I have. Really understanding U.S. poverty and what's going on there. There's a few dozen books that try and give you a glimpse of that are very good. This book, Factfulness, let me say, it definitely creates a framing for what's going on in the world. And the other one that's right up there is any Pinker book, starting with Better Angels of Our Nature. I think success is always a bit dangerous, and you can think that whatever your success was because you are magically gifted in understanding things. Whereas, of course, any success, particularly a gigantic success, is a huge number of factors, including hard work and understanding, but timing, other people who came to work with you, other people who might have done the same thing who somehow messed up in doing it. And so often you'll have too much confidence about what you understand. In science, as Feynman said, the easiest person to fool is yourself. And so you have to force yourself to go through again and again and think through, is this the right thing to be doing? Will this work? Am I doing it because it would be exciting if it succeeded? Am I really looking at these factors? In fact, in polio, several times we had to say to ourselves, was it time to give up? Or really, did we think there was a prospect of being able to move forward?
Do you have any regrets in your life? You seem to have a life that most people would love to live. You got a happy family, great marriage, foundation, business success. Is there anything, can you make us feel good by saying you've done something that didn't work out, or just make us, because all of us feel bad because we look at you and we can't do what you've done. So tell us something that's bad that you've done or you feel inadequate about. Something, there must be something.
No, I am super lucky. They marrying Melinda, the experience at Microsoft, that although it had its ups and downs was phenomenal. The work of the foundation, and
no regrets about anything.
I wouldn't try and go back and change anything. I mean, for example, the antitrust lawsuit against Microsoft, was bad for the company. It created a lot of distraction. We would have done a lot of things, including the mobile operating system, better if it hadn't been for that. But in a way, it was a lesson for me, so it probably accelerated my retirement by 5 or 6 years, which overall for me probably was a good thing. I don't think it was a principled set of activities, but that's another story.
So today, the greatest pleasure of your life is when you're doing what? Is it other than being interviewed by me or something like that? What are the greatest pleasure of your life?
Time with kids, time with scientists, time when I'm reading and things are making sense. Going out and seeing the impact of the foundation's work, meeting with scientists who think we can make breakthroughs to help solve climate. These are super interesting problems, and having a broad set of system thinking applied to these problems is going to be necessary to orchestrate the resources and policies behind them. So, I love my work. The key thing was that Paul, Alan, and I had loved working on software since we were lucky enough to be exposed. Literally, I was 13 in 8th grade when this time-sharing terminal came in, and we just did it day and night and got better. And we could see that the magic of software combined with this miracle of the microprocessor, subject to Moore's law, exponential improvement, that was a magic combination. And we'd look around and say, hey, how come everybody's not saying this is amazing? I mean, we're going to dethrone IBM, and why doesn't Digital Equipment get it? Why is the guy who runs it, this is a company that's long gone, but dominated mini computers at the time, why isn't that guy up there saying it's wrong? We know it's right. And so the key event for us was, it was a very cold Boston winter, and a kit computer came out on this Popular Electronics magazine, and we said, oh, damn, this is happening without us. I mean, here we are doing nothing. And so we called the company up and said, hey, we're ready. And then we called them back. We actually did the work, and then we called them back and said, how do you make the stuff go in and out of the computer, the I/O? And they said, well, that's interesting. Nobody else has ever asked that. You must really be doing something. So that was, anyway, our very first customer. And so we grabbed onto it to be the very first. And we were the first to say there should be a software industry and come and do it. In a sense, it was one of the lower risk things I've ever done in my life because, I could have always gone back. Well, my dad didn't say, hey, if you go away for a few years, I'll stop paying for your education. They were nice and said, okay, go, learn your lesson down there in the desert, and then you get back to the serious stuff, and we're still waiting. If you want to learn computer science, just Knuth wrote the book. Buy it, okay? Read it and do the problems for if you really think you know this thing. If you want to learn physics, Feynman wrote the book. Just read the damn book. It's all there. So that when we put stuff online, we don't have anything in online physics that's any better than Feynman's book, honestly. Now, it's a little easier to learn. The guy makes jokes every 20 minutes, or at least tries to, and he does more demos and things. So learning is a weird social phenomena. And so, our foundation, our big problem is that the group that does the worst with online learning are low-income students, because their notion of why am I learning, their sense of self-confidence, the ability to figure out, oh, I just got stuck because, 2 minuses cancel out, and I never saw that notation before. They just hit dead ends all the time, that if you're sitting in your dorm at Stanford, somebody walks down and helps you get through it.
I feel like you always seem to swing for the fences in general. It's just sort of a new way of framing it. But I have to ask, if you are swinging for the fences, what if you miss?
Well, hopefully you get more than one swing.
Yeah.
Either at the same problem, like multiple malaria vaccine constructs, so that if you have 2 or 3, the combined chance of success is much higher, or that you're working in multiple areas, not just one area.
Right.
In climate, for example, I have a company that's trying to make a nuclear reactor that would be very cheap and that would have safety, so that the public would be very accepting of it.
Yeah.
Now, even I realize that's high risk, less than 50% chance all that comes together. And yet, if it did, and the only reason I'm involved is it would really help with climate, let us generate electricity without any greenhouse gases. When I started Microsoft, I didn't think of it as all that risky. I mean, I was so excited about what we were doing. It's true I could have gone bankrupt, but I had a set of skills that were highly employable. And in fact, my parents were still willing to let me go back to Harvard and finish my education if I wanted to.
You've always got a job with me, Bill.
And the thing that was scary to me wasn't quitting and starting the company. It was when I started hiring my friends and they expected to be paid. And then we had customers who went bankrupt, customers that I'd counted on to come through. And so then I got this incredibly conservative approach that I wanted to have enough money in the bank to pay a year's worth of payroll, even if we didn't get any payments coming in. And I'm almost true to that the whole time. We have about 10 billion now, which is pretty much enough for the next year. Anyway, if you're going to start a company, it takes so much energy that it better overcome your feeling of risk. I don't think that you necessarily, if you're going to start a company, should do it at the start of your career. I think there's a lot to be said for working for a company, learning how they do things. If you're young, it's hard to go lease premises. They made that hard for me. You couldn't rent a car when you were under 25 at the time, so I was always taking taxis to go see customers. People would, people say, well, we're going to go have a discussion in the bar. Well, I couldn't go to the bar. But that's fun, because I'll tell you, when people are first skeptical and they think, oh, this kid doesn't know anything, then when you show them you've really got a good product and you know something, they actually tend to go overboard and they think, whoa, they know a lot. Let's really do an incredible amount with these people. So our youth, at least in this country, was a huge asset for us once we reached a certain threshold. It is hard. It's hard to hire older people because they'll be a little bit conservative about whether they should come and take the risk. And it took 3 or 4 years before we could go out into the normal sort of employment pool. But those problems that come with starting a firm, you better think of those as part of the pleasure, part of the challenge that is part of the excitement. Throughout our history, we wake up every day knowing that in the business of technology, you have to think about, what are you missing? What is the research or customer feedback that you should be paying more attention to? And how do you keep that pace of innovation very, very high? How do you make sure you're hiring the very best people? And that kind of focus has helped drive us forward through all the milestones the company has had. Certainly the internet is a great example of that. We had to tear up our plans and step back and say, well, how do we really embrace all that's good about the internet and recognize some of the shortcomings and make sure we're leading the way in reducing what has held people away from the internet. Computers, when I was young, were super expensive, and my friend Paul Allen and I actually snuck into places at the University of Washington where they had computers that weren't being used at night. And so we were fascinated by what the computer could do, but very few people were getting exposure. We had to go out of our way, and we were lucky that we did it all. And so then when the idea of moving the computer onto a chip that Intel would make, and that would make the computer literally millions of times cheaper than the ones we were using, so both more powerful and available to people on a personal level, then the idea of, okay, it would be very different, the software you needed, the way the industry would work. We were super lucky to be there when that was happening.
So what did your family think? Did they say, there's something wrong with this young man, he wants to just do computers?
They knew I was obsessed with computers, that I would skip athletics, that I'd go in overnight, that I'd leave the house sometimes when they preferred I wouldn't go work at night on these things. And so it was kind of considered a little strange. And the big moment was when I said, instead of going to part of my senior year, that I wanted to go work for a company writing software. So they were great about allowing that to be my hobby.
So you went to Harvard and you dropped out. Have you ever thought how your life could be better off if you had gotten your Harvard degree?
Well, I'm a weird dropout because I take college courses all the time. I love learning company courses and things, so I loved being a student. And there were smart people around, and they fed you, and they gave you these nice grades that made you feel smart. So I feel it was unfortunate that I didn't get to stay there, but I don't think I missed any knowledge because whatever I needed to learn, I was still in a learning mode.
So you are here with your daughter, who is 21, right? And you were 21 when you became a billionaire. Is that right?
Almost, yep.
All right, so around that age, you were like the youngest person to become a billionaire. Is that right?
Yeah, in terms of my own, earning it on my own, yeah.
Right. Okay, so, well, it's just the most important thing, yeah. So, when you were a kid, did you care about money, or you just cared about technology and it just happened?
Mostly I love software. I do remember at the private school I went to, there were other kids whose families were better off, like they had a Porsche or something, but it wasn't that big of a deal. My thing was that I just loved doing software, I loved hiring people, and I was stunned when it ended up being so valuable.
Really?
Yeah.
It surprised you?
Yeah, because I always had to be careful that we wouldn't hire too many people. I was always worried because people who worked for me were older than me and they had kids, and I always thought, well, what if we don't get paid? Will I be able to meet the payroll? So I was always very conservative about the finances. And then when we did go public, what was I, 30 by then I was kind of stunned at what it multiplied out to. Education is essentially a social construct. It's not that the universities have secret knowledge that only they have available. I took, these numbers won't make any sense anymore, but the hardest freshman math class was called Math 55. I assume it's not called that anymore, but it was a group of it was a group of 80 people whose personal positioning was they were the best person at math that they had ever met. So there were 79 frauds. One person who really was the best at math. The guy who came in first in the class is a lawyer in New York now. The guy who came in second is a professor of chaos theory at Princeton. And then I came in third. So I knew, okay, math, geez, that's interesting. Anyway, I didn't take physics 55, but I read the Feynman book. And so if you're motivated, seriously, you don't have to take a course. The Feynman book, if you're hardcore, just read the Feynman book, do the problems. You want to learn to do software? Read The Art of Computer Programming. Good luck doing the problems, but anyone that's rated 30 or harder is like super hard to do. And so a MOOC, in a sense, doesn't change what counts. It's always been in the textbook, but the percentage of students who just buy textbooks and read them and know the subject is vanishingly small. You kind of have to have this thing where a bunch of kids all come at the same time. And if you don't study, you're going to get a bad grade and your parents may not like that. You have to create all these social things in order for people to get into this mode of hyper-concentrating and actually understanding, why should I concentrate? If I'm a high school student, they put X's and Y's up on the board. How does that relate to my life? Now, if you understood that being good at math lets you get a good job, travel the world, you might say, okay, it does relate to me, but that's a very indirect thing, and the kind of discipline to care about that, to concentrate, that's what's missing. And so MOOCs, to the degree that it's easier to take a MOOC than it is to read a textbook, yeah, that's nice. It's a little bit interactive, there's a video. That's partly why I like the Learning Company, like all their economics. There's a guy named Timothy Taylor who has 5 courses on economics I super recommend. And you learn to like him and his way of explaining things. So a MOOC is a slightly more digestible form of learning, but it doesn't take, particularly for somebody at a young age, it in no way changes this question of why should people engage in that learning, and how do you create the environment and the sense of achievement and the sense of capability that sitting in there and looking at X's and Y's and manipulating them seems like a smart thing to do.
Let's say you're interviewing for a junior engineer position at Microsoft. Sitting in a boardroom or on video call in 2020. Why should we hire you?
You should look at the code that I've written. I'm kind of crazy. I write software programs way beyond any classes that I've taken and think I've gotten better over time. So take a look at how ambitious I've been there. I do think I can work well with people. I might criticize their code a little harshly, but overall, I like to be on a team. I like ambitious goals. I like thinking through how we can anticipate the future. Software is cool, and I want to be involved.
How would you define your strengths and your weaknesses? How you can, incorporate those into a team kind of aspect?
Well, I'm not somebody who knows a lot about marketing. I wouldn't enjoy being a salesman. For a position where you're actually creating the products and thinking through what those features should be, I'm fascinated by that. I followed the history of the industry, read about the mistakes that have been made. So product definition, product creation, very strong. If you have a team that understands the customers, the sales, the marketing, I'm not going to bring that, but I would enjoy working with them. When you have a tragedy like this pandemic, there is always the possibility you're going to narrow your community that you care about. You're going to think about yourself or your family, not the whole country, including those who've been somewhat left behind. Likewise, there's a risk looking at Africa and other developing countries and saying, no, we need to help them out because difficulties there of not enough food are really extreme, and small amounts of the budget, less than 1%, can help them out. Likewise, you don't want to just think about the here and now, you also want to think about the future. After all, the government failed us by not anticipating this pandemic. There were voices like mine in TED Talk and other venues that kind of said, hey, get ready. We don't know when, but it's coming. Sadly, that didn't happen. Another thing we trust government to get us ready for is climate change. That's coming, and it won't be as easy as creating a vaccine to solve it. And so right now, in terms of people's sympathy being broad, being willing to address other problems even though they're not here right now, I am actually seeing a lot of positive voices. People saying, make sure the recovery is a green recovery. Europe has done a lot on that. And actually the dialogue in politics about, does climate change matter is stronger today than it's ever been. So this closing in and only worrying about the short term, I'm not seeing that. Of course, your audience, which is very young, will be the key to saying, let's not just look at this short term. Let's start the investments that deal with inequities. Let's start the investments that can make sure climate change doesn't come in and have even more tragic results than this pandemic does. Young people thinking about policies, getting involved. I think I'm seeing an uptick. I hope that's sustained because they're the ones who will really do the innovative work. We think that progress can actually accelerate. The last 15 years have been wonderful, but the next 15, we can do more. And some people worry that when you talk about progress, that it'll reduce people's commitment to make things better. They think when you talk about progress that it shows you're naive and that maybe you don't realize all those things that are left to be done and how horrific they are. So sometimes purely that negative side of the story gets told, but you lose something very important if you only look at it that way. You lose the optimism about what's possible, and you lose the information where you look at the places that have done better than others, and you understand what is it about delivery, innovation, partnerships, caring, what has come together for the very best progress, and then spread that to the other places. That's what will help us drive at full speed. Historically, the newspapers or the media were very responsible about not letting untruths about vaccine safety get out there. Now, you don't want to get rid of the good thing, which is that anybody can publish.
Right.
The barriers to entry, the diversity of voices is so phenomenal compared to traditional publishing.
Right. I feel like, and you have a bit of a YouTube presence, so you're able to share information about things through social media. It's kind of a social media age, so I feel like that ideally helps your cause more than it hurts it.
Yeah, my audience probably isn't deep with the vaccine doubters.
Okay, fair.
But in a creative way, trying to get positive messages to be interesting, and we have work to do on that. I would have thought, using experts and scientific knowledge, that all the internet would just make it so much easier to learn about things, and yet in some ways, people aren't seeking out complex information, particularly if it disagrees with some preconceived notion that they have. So, how can social media get out there and be a little bit of a force for education, particularly on climate, where without a consensus, we won't do the hard things that will save things for the next generation. Part of the thing that drives computer science forward is doing risky things, having a long-term time horizon. And when Microsoft was a small company, we benefited from the fact that AT&T and Xerox and other companies had made investments in research, that they'd reached out and worked with universities on a broad basis. So we felt very lucky that as we got to a certain level of success, we could start our own research group and have that research group be in partnership with top universities all over the world doing advanced programs, things that range from the work on speech recognition all the way up to quantum computing. We have a fairly serious program that has a high risk of failure, which makes it fun and interesting on quantum computing. And even in the best case, it's probably a decade away before that makes a difference. But that's the kind of thing that when it works can have incredibly high payoff. We felt a little bad, certainly I did, about leaving the university when I thought very interesting work on artificial intelligence was really on the verge of taking place and symbolically proving programs were correct. Ironically now, it's taken a long time. The rate of progress, which is hard to make numeric, in both those areas has been quite modest. I mean, we haven't gone backwards or anything, but AI has turned out to be a tougher problem, which is fascinating. And now there are some interesting advances, and likewise symbolic type things, there are some now advances. So we thought we'd miss being more at the center of those. Now through at least funding Microsoft research, we get to have some level of involvement in that. One of Paul's ideas was to build a 360 emulator. That was the dominant mainframe of the time, used bit slice architecture to just blow away the pricing on mainframe computing. But we decided that was kind of boring compared to personal computing. A company came along about 5 years later, 2Pi, and did it. They didn't do the software piece right. That's why they failed, because we still think it was a good idea. But we didn't have anything even close to, hey, let's build a computer that we want to use, that we want to have as a tool for our own messing around and communication and creativity. That kind of got at the center of our thinking, even from the
Some special bonus clips that I think you're going to enjoy. But before that, it's time for the Billionaire Mindset question of the day. I want to know, what was your single biggest takeaway from this video and your plan of action for the next week? Also, if you've already got your Billionaire Mindset companion PDF calendar, get ready for another amazing video tomorrow. Or if you don't have it yet, you can get it for free in the first line of the description below. And if you're enjoying this Billionaire Mindset series, give me a hashtag Billionaire Mindset in the comments below so I can celebrate you.
I think that this is a deep problem in perception, is that if you want something to improve, you have a tendency to be bothered by the status quo and to think that it's much worse than it is. And that can be beneficial because you don't like, say, the level of violence in the world, the level of poverty, the level of number of kids dying. But if you divorce yourself from the true facts of improvement and look at the exemplars, look at what's worked, if you get sort of a general despair about is the world improving, then you won't latch on to those examples. The Steven Pinker example, one of my favorite books of all time, is that if you ask people, is this one of the most violent eras in history, they will say yes. So overwhelming Americans say yes. Well, it's overwhelmingly the least violent era in history. And so what it means is your disgust at violence actually increases, and that's partly why we take steps and why within our own society and the world at large it's come down so dramatically.
If you want to sign up for the entire Billionaire Mindset series for free and get the companion bonus PDF calendar, check the link right there next to me. I think you'll love it. Continue to believe, and I'll see you there.